LiSTNR production.
Comedian Nazeem Hussain has done a lot of things. He created a TV show on SBS, Legally Brown. He made the grand finals of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here a few years ago and has recently added children's book author to his accolades. In our chat today, the failed lawyer shares his most terrifying performance experience to date. And I thought it might have been filming a Netflix special, but no, that wasn't it. So you're going to find out what that was, what he has next for audiences, and we also explore the line between politics and humour and what happens if the powers that be think you've overstepped. And later in the show, Helen, my very kind, very cool producer, far cooler than me, joins me for the weekend list, where we chat about what we're currently watching, doing, listening to, and everything in between. But first, here's my chat with the comedian whose Netflix show, called Public Frenemy, also happens to be one of my favourite frenemies, Nazeem Hussain. Nazeem, welcome to the weekend briefing. I'm going to start off by asking, did you always want to be a comedian? And I want to hear the funniest talking to you got from a relative who was like, be an engineer, what are you doing?
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't always want to be a comedian. I didn't even know I wanted to be a comedian when I started becoming one. It was just sort of like, it was just a bit of a progression.
Yeah, right.
Like addiction, it just sort of sneaks up on you until you realise, I can't get out of this. I'm in too deep. But yeah, I was sort of mucking around. Probably started, well, I was always like, was I always a class clown? Probably was. Always just making the teacher laugh, breaking the rules, getting away with it because they would crack up at my excuses and interrupt with annoying questions. I was just a troll in all facets. Even at home.
You were a troll before internet trolling became a thing.
I was a troll before it was profitable.
Yeah, right.
Before I then got off, got noticed for it and were like, hey, prank shows, why don't you try them? But even when I was 2 or 3, I used to I was imitating everybody, and relatives and family members would just be at home, just kind of waiting for me to do them. Some of my earliest memories were me sitting on the front step of our house in Burwood in Melbourne, and just as people would walk past, I would start talking to them in like a real Ocker accent. I'd be like, "G'day, mate," and they'd say, "Oh, g'day, mate, how's it going?" And then I'd say, "Oh, g'day, mate, how's it going?" I'd repeat exactly back to them what they were saying to me, and behind me,
like a little parrot,
like a little annoying Sri Lankan parrot on the step, and my family would be inside just watching through the window, laughing. And that was probably my first audience, and I definitely would have enjoyed that. I remember when I was a Muslim camp once, we did this thing called Nazeem Live. So after, it was kind of classes during the day, learning your basics, and then at night, infotainment. So I will be the host, kind of like when Rove Live was a big thing. And
where were you doing this?
This is kind of past Healesville in Melbourne.
Yeah, but this is at the camp.
At the camps, yeah. Yeah, so I'd sort of do a bit of stand-up and then introduce the guests, and the guests would be, today we've got a great psychologist coming to talk to us about mental health. And so then Sister Monique Tui would come up and she would talk, and it'd be like a wholesome chat. But I was the funny guy, kind of making learning entertaining.
But did anyone at any point, any well-meaning relative was like, Nazeem, you need to become an engineer. What is this nonsense?
Oh, well, engineer's probably more of an Arab thing, right? Well,
yeah,
engineer's probably third for us.
Yeah, right.
Yours is you're Lebanese, yeah?
Yeah.
So that's probably number 1 or 2. Doctor,
dentist, engineer, and number 4 is disgrace to your family.
Yeah, right. Well, that's probably lawyer, because I feel I hear law in the Middle East is not as respected as it is in the subcontinent or in Australia. But anyway, I studied law and science, but that was, again, a failure. I should have studied medicine. So I was I was doing the right thing. And so people were never doubting that I was doing the right thing. Is when I left, that's when I had to come out to my mum. I actually started doing Legally Brown, which is my show on SBS.
Yes.
And I went to my boss at work and I said, I got to do this show. I can take some time off if you like, some leave of absence. Or I don't have to do it if you don't want. Honestly, I don't have to do it. And he goes, what are you talking about? It's your own television show. You just do it. The corporate world's always going to be here.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, fine. So I took time off. Work was fine. But I still was living with my mum, and I'd leave the house every day in a suit and drive to not work, change into casual clothes, write and work on this comedy show.
So your mum thought you were still going to work as a lawyer?
Yeah, and then I used to come home, get changed back in the suit, and, mum, work was tough. Anyway, at one point she came, a few months in, she came to, so bad.
Oh my God, you're like an undercover comedian.
Oh, I was just I don't know about undercover. Yeah, I was trying to please her,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was anyway, there was so many ways she was going to find out.
Like when it aired on television.
Like when it aired, well, I thought she would find out like a week before. My plan was like a week before it airs, I'll say, oh, I'm going to film this TV show. She doesn't know how long TV takes. She thinks 30 minutes of TV might take 35, 40 minutes to film.
Yeah.
You know, it's, a bit of extra. We'll cut out those bits. She doesn't realize that like 2 minutes of TV takes a day or something, or 2 days and writing. So anyway, so she came to my work 3 months into this lie, and she came to deliver lunch. Like, so it was without lunch. She came lunch, reception, Freshwater Place in South Bank, Melbourne. She said, hello, I'm just here to drop off lunch for my son. And the receptionist was like, so what's his name? And Nazeem Hussain. And then she put it in the system. She's like, sorry, he doesn't work here. She goes, no, my son, he works here. He left the house this morning. He just forgot his lunch or something. I just want to bring him lunch. And checked on the system. No, he stopped working here 3 months ago.
Oh my
God. And I was like, what the fuck? So she called me up. Nazeem, what the hell? You're not at work? I've got lunch. And I was like, And I couldn't even come. I said, no, I'm at a subsidiary. Anyway, she found out. But we never really spoke about it. That was her great probably disappointment / just huge worry. Imagine I'm now a clown for life. How the hell am I paying the bills with this thing? So, the TV show aired and she was like, okay, good. So you're going to go back to work. But then the second season happened and it just started getting busy. So she never said, I accept you as a comedian. Yes. But she started showing up to all of my shows.
Well, she probably just needed to know where to go to deliver lunch.
She didn't.
To be fair.
Exactly.
Okay, well, you've done a lot of things. You're undercover TV show. We've got I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. You've written a children's book. You've been on Q&A with Malcolm Turnbull. You've had a Netflix special. What has been the most terrifying of those and what's been the most rewarding?
The most terrifying of those? Oh, my goodness. To be honest, Q&A did scare the shit out of me. I was working at PwC at the time. I think it was 2011. It was after Bin Laden died. So whatever that was. They were like, Bin Laden is dead. Who do we get on? There's a comedian guy who works at PwC. I've just named, but they got me on, and I was also on the Islamic Council of Victoria, so the representative body for Muslims in Victoria. So it was I was many different lives I was juggling, but far out. I remember like feeling immediately out of my depth, but also like a sense of obligation because everyone was like, well, you're the spokesperson, so go ahead. And I crammed as much as I thought I could for like a day, but then, my palms were really sweaty. And I remember just like kind of dropping the professional sounding facade when we were on air. And I remember I gave him a massage, like Malcolm Turnbull, when we were back and forthing. He was getting stressed out and trying
You gave him a massage?
I remember I was like, just chill out, Malcolm. And I like kind of rubbed his shoulders, just to, like as I would when you're ribbing your friend and annoying them. And kind
of physically rubbed his shoulders?
Yeah, physically rubbed his shoulders.
Okay.
Like I was like, whoa, just chill out, Malcolm. And then at one point he tried to, there's a clip on YouTube, but it was, I think he didn't try to characterize me as a terrorist, but I remember I was like, okay, I've got to be very careful with my words. This next sentence could define me as a terrorist sympathizer or not. Like I was basically saying, you're going to have Bin Ladens when you have Western intervention. What do you think's going to happen? But I remember he said something like, oh, so it's our fault, is it? And I was like, okay, very careful right now how I respond to this.
Yeah, right.
But it was like, I was like an early 20-something kid I was an adult. But, it was bloody stressful.
There is one thing that caught me because I remember your facial expression.
Yeah.
It was a couple of years ago and it was a live special on the ABC. I believe it was live.
Okay.
And it was when John Howard, there were a whole bunch of kind of awards and nods given, and John Howard was recognised as the most popular Prime Minister.
Talks.
Yeah, Australia Talks.
Yes,
John Howard was recognised as the most popular Prime Minister in history.
Yes.
And he came and he sat on the panel and then you asked him a question. Like I said, by now it's more than a decade after the Cronulla riots.
Yes.
And you asked a question to the effect of, do you think that the Cronulla riots had anything to do with race and racism?
Yeah.
To which he responded, oh, no, I don't believe so. That was not my experience.
Not my experience. And
your face, I was like...
oh, okay, oh, well, your experience as an older white guy in power. But I remember I was very, very torn about even participating in the episode. I was like, oh, now I've got to interview a war criminal. This is how I view him,
Yeah.
And part of the identity of being not just Muslim, but a brown person in Australia, left lean, all that sort of stuff. I was like, he's probably my natural enemy ideologically. So, I was very torn, but I was like, no, I'm going to participate in the program and ask him some challenging questions. But man, he's one of the greatest like he's a very clever politician, and he knows how to answer all these questions. He's never been stumped on anything. So I remember asking him that question, and he said it doesn't have anything to do with racism.
Yeah, and he said, like, not in my experience,
Not in my
but
experience.
in the experience of history books and everybody who's then looked at that event, it has defined Australia as one of our most, like, modern history's pinnacle racist point.
And that's the thing, like, he could have got away with that answer back then. But now, I think the thing with asking John Howard questions or outing someone for their outdated views is to literally just let them say it. You're not going to pin him. And I feel like he's not going to get how badly that sounded because now he's past his time.
Yeah, I guess so.
But I remember like asking him a couple other questions about the war in Iraq and a couple other, but in my ear, and I'm not outing anybody. Literally, the producer said, Nazeem, you need to smile a bit more and calm down. And and so they did. They certainly edited like a couple of questions out, but it was like one of the most. That was probably more stressful than Q&A.
Well, I saw that in your face because I'm like every part of your being, like I would if I was to hear that because it directly impacted both our communities.
Absolutely,
I would be like, bro, what are you smoking? And, you know, can I have some? And also, that's just a blatant lie.
Yeah.
I'm imagining recording a Netflix special would be pretty stressful because it's going to be up there forever and ever for people to see. But
this
I want
is a very triggering episode, isn't
it? My aim is to leave you traumatized. No, but I actually want to know, like, behind this is because I always wonder, like, do they edit out any stuff ups? Because every Netflix thing I've seen looks so seamless. Yeah. Also, do you get all of your rellos and mates in the crowd to make sure everybody laughs and claps?
This was in Montreal, so it was a kind of a weirder Netflix special experience. Like, we were all sent, like, there's a bunch of comedians went to Montreal to film their specials there, and so
you couldn't have a rent-a-crowd.
Couldn't have a rent-a-crowd. So it's normally when you do a special, it's like, oh yeah, your home crowd's there. They're like, yeah, he's made it. Look, we all know him and love him. We've seen him from when he started out. But these are all just random Montreal people. And so, like, I knew nobody. I had to complete, which is, in a way, it means that if they're laughing, there's probably a bit of politeness, but also, like, they're like, okay, the joke's good. So you have to win them over from scratch.
Yeah,
so it's I felt like it was a harder experience, but, like, a bit more nerve-wracking that, you know, I've got to win them over. But once it's going right, then, like, it's just like any other gig. You record two. So you record back to back and then they edit between the two. So
that's why it looks so seamless. Because I'm like, these comedians don't forget a line.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of forgetting.
I want to talk about funny because there are different types of funny. There are people who are like really funny in their retorts on social media. You've got those people who just off the cuff can be funny. And then performance funny is a whole different kind of funny. But you've written children's book.
I'm children's book funny.
Yeah, like what kind of funny craft is that?
Well, that's when you're bored in COVID craft. That's when there's no live gigs anymore, funny. I'm a dad, so I think you're a mum.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
You know how it is, like getting the...
Yeah, my daughter read your book in a night. She loved it. And she's like,
By the way, it's not just 2 pages, everyone.
No, like it's a chapter book.
It's 192 pages, book one. And I think
a lot of pictures, to be
mostly
fair.
pictures. And that's most of the work Heath Mackenzie does.
Yeah.
He does it. I just write the words and he then brings it to life and makes it look great and funny and stuff. But
the best review I got was, oh my God, I love this book. Nazeem, tell Nazeem she's really funny.
I'll take that. Honestly, I'll take it. So, you know, like that's a compliment. Also, when people go, oh, you're actually funny. Like, that's a great, I'll take that as well.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, you're actually funny. Thank you. But making your kids laugh. Or for me is the biggest, like I just need their validation. More than an audience of strangers, now it's about the kids.
Yeah.
If they love me or find me funny, then if I come home from a great gig and I crack a joke and my kids are like, not funny, like that's kind of actually my night. They haven't done that yet.
Yeah,
right. That's like, oh gosh.
Okay.
I always want to be cool to them.
Look, you've never been one to shy away from topics many would find off limits. Like, I love the daring jokes, the dark humour, the spicy zingers. Like, dangerous comedy is something that I'm drawn to. How do you know if you've gone too far? Do you test material out on people or do you wait to see if the crowd just stays quiet?
The thing is, it's not like I try to do edgy material or stuff that's just... I do all sorts of stuff, but I think it's sometimes about who's saying it than what's being said.
Yeah.
Because I'm a Muslim brown guy in Australia. If I make jokes about... the same sorts of jokes about society and culture as everybody else, but because I'm saying it, suddenly it's more politically charged.
But you can also, I'll challenge you on that, you can also go into territory that others can't. Because when it's self-deprecating or when it's something to a community you belong to,
That's
you can
true.
be...
And also, like,
you can kind of jab there a bit more.
Absolutely. And, the stuff that we joke about in our communities, my wife's Lebanese, so I found that there's a huge similarity, especially like Muslim chat, like, but also like ethnic chat. Like, we talk about, just like any minority talks about the majority, like when they're by themselves.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that we joke about is always like, it's subversive, I guess, when you say it to a broader audience.
Yes.
So doing those sorts of jokes, making jokes about, the culture, the broader culture, is probably challenging. But yeah, you find out immediately in front of the audience, and you're always making mistakes because that's how jokes are made. You don't get to write them perfectly at home and then try them out once they're finished. You're trying them out for the first time in front of audiences. So, people ask, "Oh, do you ever bomb on stage?" It's like, yes, all the time. You have to bomb on stage regularly because that means you're trying new material.
And then the art is in the recovery.
The art is in the recovery, or the art is in recovering the next day. Like, you don't necessarily recover on stage. Sometimes it's just like, oh, well, that didn't work, and everybody just saw it.
Yeah.
But, you just got to keep going. I think all I've learned in my experience as a comedian is just to try as much as you can to not let them know that you're dying on the inside. Just try to make it look like, it's all good. I'm happy to be here.
And in terms of reading those audiences and recovering from them, do different audiences differ around the country?
Yeah.
Are you a hit in Brisbane and not so much in Perth or whatever?
Oh, you can definitely tell the personality of the cities by the stand-up audiences. So Sydney, you know where you stand with Sydney. They laugh loud and fast. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
They're just honest people. Melbourne a little bit cooler, We've seen a lot of jokes, so, you're going to have to challenge
work
us.
Harder.
Yeah, work harder. But they're general. Adelaide quirkier. They're just like, they love the sort of, Adelaide fringe crowds anyway. But also like Adelaide, if they're coming to watch comedy, they're a little sort of alternative. Perth get dressed up to go out. Like, they're cashed up. They
right.
treat it like a proper night out. And in fact, I think ticket prices are more expensive over there too.
Okay.
Brisbane's a surprising thing. Like, I feel like they're always overcompensating for being from Queensland. They're like, no, we're good.
Yeah,
we're
we
really
like
good.
You. Yeah.
See? Darwin's just happy anyone's there. Same as Tasmania. I've done a couple of gigs there, and
So Darwin's...
They're just like, oh my God, you came here? Are you lost? Bali's, you're stopping off, right? But yeah, so it's kind of cool. Like, you genuinely get to feel how, like, a place, and like, it's like traveling. You can, as a comedian, when you go anywhere, you feel, as soon as you go to a backstage of any comedy room, you're like, these are my people. And then I feel like as soon as you can do a gig to an audience of people anywhere, you've connected with the place that you're in.
Yeah.
You can travel anywhere and not talk to people, just look at the sights. But it's only when you've had that person-to-person contact that you're like, now I'm here. I'm embedded in the place. So
I want to talk, earlier you mentioned about what's considered saucy. And I totally get it, because I can say something and they'll be like, aggressive. And it's like, I said it in a really really soft tone,
just
but I'm aggressive.
Standing up looking over the top of you doesn't mean...
I could be sitting on the floor, like, doing the peace sign, and I'll be still called aggressive.
Yeah.
Because Hassan Minhaj, there's been this, supposed expose in New Yorker magazine, which looked into some of his stories in his comedy segments and looked at how truthful he was being in those. And I find it interesting because, I kind of understand that a lot of comedy would be embellishment, and B, do you get that up close and investigative with every comedian's material? Because I think you'd probably find out a lot of them are like quasi-truth, a heavy dose of bullshit.
Absolutely. Like, yeah, I think it's, Hassan Minhaj, culturally quite powerful, and I think was up for the Daily Show gig.
Yeah.
And after this sort of controversy, like, in a nutshell, basically, the New Yorker did a piece on him, which I think in hindsight now is because he did a 20-minute response video, kind of going through the detail of the claims against him, and then, like, he kept receipts, he recorded the chats with the New Yorker and how they kind of misquoted him or took the... But he's very funny, and he has a brilliant ability to turn really challenging conversations into thought-provoking, beautiful pieces of comedy. Like, he
weaves it into political and social commentary that has a lot of cut through.
Absolutely. He's got a huge audience. Like, he does Radio City hall in New York, like massive following, and it's just interesting that they went after him to fact check his jokes and stories. And yes, sure, a lot of them were about instances of racism that he alleges he experienced, and
like I'll go through for our listeners not familiar with them. One pertained to a real life classmate that he says the classmate's dad said that he was too brown to take her to the prom. Another one was a joke including anthrax spilling on his young daughter. So they're very much related to his experiences of racism, which we know makes people hella uncomfortable.
And they were like, oh, well, specifically the anthrax didn't fall on your daughter. And he's like, yeah, well, anthrax got delivered to my house. Sorry. I wasn't completely factual. I'm telling a stand-up story. This happened to me.
Yeah.
Anthrax got sent to my house. But why go after him?
Yeah, yes.
Go after freaking... There are comedians saying horrible jokes at the expense of, like... I don't know if you saw... Look, I don't know this guy, Matt Rife, and I don't like taking down other comedians, but he started his special with, like, a joke about... a joke about a woman and a black eye and, like... the food not being good enough and like, go after that guy.
Yeah.
Not Hussain. Look, don't go after comedians before you go after politicians and, executives of companies and people that actually have proper influence.
Yes, and who do we hold up to be, like, who do we hold a truth barometer up to? And is it a comedian? If it is going to be a comedian, how many other comedians? I found it interesting that they zeroed in on Hasan Minhaj because if it was a broader piece about embellishments and lies and comedy, and they looked into 6 or 7, it felt like a bit of a hit piece.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm also not sure what is achieved when you go, see, racism doesn't exist.
Yeah, I know.
It's not that bad. The anthrax was just next to your daughter, not on her. Like, I'm not sure what the public interest or gain is.
I think the interest was something to do with, like, see how people are cashing in on woke politics, and people are cashing in on identity, critical race, all that sort of stuff. Like, and Hasan Minhaj is at the perfect nexus of, like, and he's a privileged middle class Indian American, and so they had a real good point to make for people that were like, I hate these people who get away with saying we can't say things and they're also making a career out of it. Bring them down, and then the whole idea is down, and then we get to, like, be in charge again.
How much do you embellish in stand-up?
Friggin' all the time. Like, I told a joke about someone, accused me of stealing some woman's bag on the plane, like, which actually was true, but the punchline was, and then I was so offended. I took my balaclava off and I was like, excuse me. Like, obviously I wasn't wearing a balaclava. Like, there's some obvious lies, but, walking into a cafe and have someone, ask me if I'm an Uber Eats guy. Like, that happened to me. I was so furious. I was like, I turned that into... For me, like, a lot of my jokes, in fact, most of them all of them come from real life things that happened to me. And I find, like, if I make stuff up, it actually isn't funny for the audience. It starts to sound whimsical and abstract. But as soon as, like, I have to say it, like, if something's really annoyed me or confused me, it's always funny. So I think I've realized, the audience can recognize truth anyway from me, and that's funniest. So I go with that.
So moving forward in 2024, I hear you've got something coming out for LiSTNR with Ursula Carson. What can you tell us about it?
Ursula and I are doing a podcast, More Than Enough Already, which is sort of like an extension of her podcast called Enough Already. So basically we just talk crap about a variety of topics.
Well, is it the stuff that gets under your skin?
Things that shit us to tears. And in this season, listeners. So ordinary people.
That shit you to tears.
That shit them to tears, and that shit us to tears, and we argue about whether those things should shit us to tears or just merely shit us smile. And it's you're not going to learn. You'll turn off the podcast after you finish listening to the entire episode. Feeling dumb. You will be dumber.
Okay, great.
Much dumber.
That is a hot sell. And you're also back on tour. You had a couple of years you haven't been on tour.
It's been 2 years. Going all around Australia. Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Perth, Auckland, New Zealand, Wellington, New Zealand. I don't want to say that country, obviously. But come to my show.
And laugh.
And laugh. Free tickets if you say you are Antoinette Lattouf.
Love that. I will get all of my friends in Brisbane on Gold Coast to come along. Thanks so much for your time. Can't wait to find out what shits you to tears.
Thank you very much.
comedian, actor, children's author, TV host Nazeem Hussain, and you can check out his new podcast, More Than Enough Already, with Ursula Carlson. It's out every Monday, where they vent about all the things that get under their skin. You can join them for an audible complaining session like no other, and you can also join in on that complaining. So just search More Than Enough Already wherever you get your podcasts. It is now time for the weekend list, where we tell you what we're reading, watching, listening to, cooking, seeing, doing, and everything in between. And of course, joining me is the wonderful Helen Smith. Helen, what have you been slurping on, listening to, doing, aspiring to?
Well, I've been trying to consume good, funny news, or like good things that make me feel like, like okay.
Yeah.
And my first thing is the Off Menu podcast with British comedians Ed Gamble and James Acaster. And it is exactly what I needed. The concept of the podcast is all these guests come on, like big names, celebrities, like my favourite episodes at the moment, the one, Lily Allen, that was great, and Louis Theroux.
Oh, great.
So good. Also, Louis just rambles that whole episode, and it's a side of him I've never seen, and I was just loving that.
But is he funny or just like
funny
journo rambling?
And weird. Like,
Okay.
oh, weird, but like in a good way. I was like, oh my God.
Is there a theme to this podcast
Yes.
or just funny people?
Yes. So the theme is your dream restaurant. So everyone comes in and you have to say what your dream menu would be, but your dream restaurant can be anything. Doesn't have to mix and match.
Yeah,
and they
right.
always start with still or sparkling water. So what?
Sparkling.
Yeah, same. Sparkling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can I tell you what my ideal restaurant
Yes.
would be? Would be an Italian restaurant that doesn't look at me like I am an insult to their very cuisine, because I'm dairy and gluten-free. So most
Oh my God.
Italian chefs want to throttle me because
Yeah, they would hate
I
you.
torture their dishes. So an Italian restaurant where the gluten and dairy-free options are as delicious as the proper pizza and pasta. I know
Yes.
that doesn't seem like a huge ask, but that's what mine would be. And when like the chefs probably don't spit in my food because they're so revolted at what I have done and how I've modified their
And they're
dishes.
like, yeah, no, that's a good one. So that has been my binge podcast over the break, over the holidays. It's so good. Could not and it makes you think about what is my dream menu. So I love it.
Okay, so what is your dream menu?
Oh, it's too hard. All I know is there'll be sushi involved.
Okay, that's doable. So I have been loving listening to Ray. She is a British artist. I didn't realise that many people knew her. I'm always like, I like to think that I discovered a person, but it seems like I haven't. So she is a singer-songwriter, and she used to do songwriting and producing for Beyonce and Rihanna, John Legend. So that gives you a bit of a sense for her sound. What I love about her and her debut album, 21st Century Blues, is that she's so fucking angry in it. And the album is essentially her saying F you to the establishment. So she wasn't able to produce an album with her first record label. Is that what you call it? Yeah, record label.
Yeah.
She had an EP, and so she ended up going independent and solo. And
Love that.
essentially the lyrics are like a big FU to everybody who stifled her. And one of the songs, the lyrics is something along the lines of, all the white man CEOs, F your privilege, get your pink chubby hands off my mouth, who you think this is. And I'm like, oh, she's a baller. I love it. She speaks my language. She has my rage.
Yeah.
She also just has the most epic voice, and the album is so good. And don't you end up thinking, how did she not have an album before this?
Yeah.
Why was she held back? Because she
Exactly.
talks about how much she's been held back.
Yeah, no, I love that about her as well. I think one of my favourite songs from her is called Oscar-Winning Tears.
Oh, yes.
It's so good. And I'm just like, how I think she's one of those artists that's so underrated and has kind of flown under the radar for a bit. And now people are like, yeah, what the heck? Like, bring her up. She's headlining heaps of festivals.
Yeah.
I think she's an example of what the music industry wants to squash sometimes. But I love that she's gone independent and she's just like, no, listen to me. I've got something to say.
And there's another song where she talks about a producer essentially sexually assaulting her.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
and
I heard
it's
about that
heavy,
one. Yeah,
but it's so
full-on.
soulful and it's so good. So yeah, check out Ray. I hope she blows up. I think she has huge amounts of talent. But yeah, what else is on your list?
So the other thing on my list that I have indulged in as well over the summer holidays season, I love a drink. I just love a drink. Drink in moderation though, always. And this is a collagen cocktail. I did not know they existed. I did not know I needed them in my life, but I love it. And yeah, okay, you have questions.
Yeah, I have questions about the taste. I have questions about why you think you need to drink collagen. I have questions about, do you get so drunk that you think your skin looks better?
Yeah, probably. Actually, these are all good questions. So, first of all,
hard-hitting journalism.
Yeah, hard-hitting. This is what we need. I tried French martini and lychee martini. Lychee martini was my favorite. French martini is still really good, but lychee I was like, nah, this one's for me.
Yeah.
But it did make me feel like, as I was drinking it, I was like, this is beginning my 2024 glow up. I was like, this is it. And it is called, it is called glow up beverages. So I was like, perfect.
Okay. We are not suggesting that you binge drink.
No.
Or we are not promoting drinking collagen. We have no idea of the medical or otherwise health impacts, but I'm glad you like it.
It was good. It was yummy.
In the interest of being good to my bank balance but still having a bit of a break, so I didn't have enough money to go away on a fancy trip, and I just envied or blocked anybody on my feed who did.
We mute them.
Yeah, I did. Yes, to be fair, I muted, not blocked. And so what I've been doing is the day before or even the day of, looking for hotels in my city that are really lovely, that are empty, and then just checking myself in for a day or two. And so you get a lovely room, sometimes a rooftop pool, and sometimes it usually several hundreds of dollars to get a room, but because it is the day of or the night before. So whether it's lastminute.com, What If, or just calling the hotel directly, I've been able to have these mini staycations, which are super affordable.
That is a hack.
Yeah, it is. It is. So I'm like, yeah, if you want to go away and you can't really afford it and you don't want to have to pay for a flight, a staycation at a nice hotel.
Oh, I love that. That's a great hack. And actually I use this app called Hopper as well that I find cheap hotels through as well. And that reminds me of that. That's another good hack as well.
Yeah, nice. Hopper.
Yeah, Hopper. It's really good. I got 60% off one hotel and I was like, damn.
And you're like, I can buy more of those collagen cocktails.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks, Helen. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for being with us and tuning in. It is always an absolute pleasure. And if you want more of the Weekend Briefing, you can find us on the LiSTNR app. You can download the LiSTNR app in the App Store and you can also follow us there. Otherwise, you can follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. And why not give us a rating and a review for this fabulous interview with Nazeem Hussain. And FYI, you can review and rate every episode. We'll be back on Monday morning with the team where we'll have the latest headlines straight to your headphones along with an interesting deep dive. Stay safe, everyone.
LiSTNR.